Range Task Force. May I have a roll call, please, and determination of quorum?
Chairperson Bagwell.
Here.
Vice Chair Fontanez.
Here.
Hang on. Member Blackwood.
Here.
Member Bonkowski. Here. Member Cooley.
Here.
Member Gerlani.
Here.
Member Hillis.
Here.
Member Howell. Member Keller. Member Robinson.
Here.
Member Tussey.
Here.
Member Schutte. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Any member of the public who would like to speak? We're on public comment period. And you can comment on each item as we go through, but for now, it's general public comment? Yep. Okay. Then we're going to move on to approval of the minutes. On the February 14th minutes, there will be 2 corrections from Library Board to Range Task Force. And I want to let the committee know that we have good cause for it being just a little bit late pursuant to the statute. This is a new committee that was formed and getting staffing and everything together. So I just need to put on the record that there was a good cause. Is there any other corrections or thoughts on the February 14th minutes? None? I'll accept a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Rifle or the Carson City Range Task Force for February 14th with the corrections as read into the record.
My name is Nick, for the record, and Nick Fontanez. I second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Does anyone have any corrections or comments on the March 6th, 2019 minutes? If not, I'll accept a motion.
I move to approve the minutes for the Carson City Range Task Force for March 6th, 2019 as presented.
Need a second.
Nick Fontanez, for the record. I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the March 6th, 2019 minutes. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Ms. Budge, are there any modifications that you know of to the agenda? Okay, great. Then we're going to move on to item 3A. This is a possible action item. Making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding the draft cooperative agreement between Carson City and the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club. Ms. Judge, Mr. Carver, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. In your packet, you have a draft, very draft, cooperative agreement based on the terms that you provided at your last meeting. We were supposed to discuss this at the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting last night, but unfortunately we didn't have a quorum. So that body wasn't able to review or comment on the agreement. Since we've posted the agenda, I have received a couple questions and a couple comments, and I just wanted to share those comments before we really dive into that, if you don't mind. One question, and requested edit was if there was a lapse of insurance that would constitute a breach of the contract. So clarifying that. I think it's implied, but we wanted to just make sure that that was clarified, and we heard that from one of the members. And then also a clarification about RSOs working at the range and where they're trained. I think it boils down to they need the NRA RSO certification, so wherever they obtain that, that's fine. They do need on-site specific training, which the club has been providing graciously. It also provided our park rangers that same site-specific training. So they will need that piece. So I just wanted to clarify that for you, and then if we need to adjust some language to give you some comfort for that, we can do that.
Madam Chair. On the insurance, the city insurance requirements already have a provision that requires a 10-day notice prior to cancellation.
And that's in here now, but we wanted to make sure there was no lapse in the coverage while the agreement is current. So I don't know if Ben wants to clarify.
Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. Yes, that language is included already in the contract. We just wanted to clarify, just in case it wasn't absolutely clear, and that's something that we can easily add, that if the assurance does lapse at any time during the agreement, then that would be cause for breach and subsequent termination.
And then I just did want to clarify that we mirrored the existing policy that the club has, so they won't have to, change the policy that they're going to be getting. And it fully met all the city's requirements, so which is great because sometimes that's a challenge for groups to get.
Chris Carter for the Rifle and Pistol Club. We support this draft. It's an interim step to get us to where we want to be. We are asking for some reciprocity from the city, but you'll see both in the agreement and the document that I provided for the club that our request is pretty minimal. What we would like some clarification on moving forward is what's the expectation after the 6 month? Are we gearing up for something? Or are we going to do away with the RSO provision at the range? And some clarification on what the next step is if this agreement's accepted. But otherwise, I think that the club's operated in good faith and the agreement's in front of you. Thank you.
Okay, is there questions concerning the agreement? Nick?
Nick Fontanez for the record. On the handout, it says you only want 4 hours. In the actual agreement, it says you want 5. And I thought we had agreed to 1 day a month, not 2 days. Because I remember that in the last meeting was the compromise. When I originally brought the motion up, which didn't get approved, it went somewhere else, but I had wanted to, I had wanted to make it as fair for everybody as possible, both the civilians and the club. So I wanted to recognize what the club was doing and show you some reciprocity, but to give you the 2 days was going to be limiting the rifle and pistol range by half of what we're already operating at. We only operate 4 days there. So to give you half of the range 2 days was too much to ask. That's why I thought we'd already agreed on 1 day for the 4 hours. And even then there's a discrepancy in the agreement. You got 5 hours here, and right here on the handout it says 4 hours.
If you can say what page you're on and which line, that way we can get those corrections made, and that way we're all on the same.
Nick Fontanez for the record. I'd be on the second page of the agreement, right under B. Range consists of outdoor shooting areas. We should permit them 50% of the rifle range for twice each month on Sundays, 5 hours in duration.
Ms. Budge and Mr. Carver, maybe as clarification, in our minutes, the motion that was made is that this range committee was going to support 1 Sunday because we were working hard to make sure we had enough public access while granting reciprocity. And so the question really is, here you're asking for twice and 5 hours, and even your memo indicates 4 hours, not 5. So maybe we can start with the number of hours that you need for your match. What's the actual answer?
Okay, so at our last meeting, I think as you, Chris Carver for the record, at your last meeting, that motion on the 1 day, to my understanding, died. We didn't actually get to a decision on what was reciprocity for the club. Subsequent to that meeting, I went over the math again and communicated with Ms. Budge on where the club was at. And I believe that Ms. Howe was not clear in what it is that we were actually asking for. We're not asking for 50% of the range. We're asking for 50% of the rifle lanes for a duration. And I cut it down based on my conversation with Mrs. Budge to the bare minimum that the club could operate its matches, and our membership, we believe, was reciprocal with the city. So the graphic that I provided in the late materials clearly articulates what exactly it is that we want. We don't want 50% of the range. We want 50% of the rifle area for 4 hours, twice a month, and those events are open to the public. And as I've stated repeatedly, that our members are community members. They're entitled to shoot there just like everybody else. We just want to have an organized activity. So that is our bottom line that was provided to you, the two periods of 4 hours each. There was some discussion at the last meeting about Saturday, which is our preferred solution, but I think that also went nowhere. So I am operating within what I heard from this board and also from Parks and Rec on what you're willing to do. But I can't obligate the club to work these hours that we're working, especially as we extend it into summer, and take less.
I mean, my question would be,
Excuse me.
oh, sorry.
You wait till.
Oh,
So just to be clear on the record, though, so that everyone's operating from the same information, the actual motion, as indicated in the minutes, was Member Howe amended her motion to have a 6-month agreement to provide the range with RSOs in exchange for using half the range per Mr. Carver's request for 1 day per month. As long, and then Member Girolani agreed to the change in motion, and the motion was carried unanimously. So the question on hand for all of us to discuss, one, we could change it to 4 hours pursuant to Mr. Carver's letter, and then twice a month. But should it be specific Sundays? Like it's going to be the first and third, or the second and fourth, because I am very concerned about the public having a knowledge base about this range, and that we don't keep changing the rules on them, and they have to worry about going to websites and trying to figure out. So just, again, I'm throwing that out there as a discussion item. Could we do 4 hours and make it set Sundays? Like it's going to be the first and third, or the second and fourth, or the first and fourth, so that everyone in the public understands that. So I throw that out. Your turn.
yes. Again, David Hillis. As Mr. Carver stated, the members of the club are also members of the public. We have just as much right now outside of the club to go and shoot. So all we're asking for is a set organized time to hold a specific match. And although this is open to the public, the club and the members of the public who are members of the club are the only ones who are keeping this range open. I don't have any other volunteers from any other organization, commercial, shooting organization, general random member of the public who has volunteered any other time to come out there and RSO to maintain it be open. So if this is the way we're going to go, maybe that we should make it a pay to play. And if we want to have a match, great. Let's set up a specific 4 to 4 hour time for RSOs, 1-to-1. Anybody can go out and volunteer once they have the proper training. But we're bearing the brunt of the work, and it is so far has not been reciprocity for our matches.
Nick?
Nick Fontanez for the record. I know for a fact that there are people reaching out to volunteer for this. I think what I've been told by several members of the public that they cannot volunteer unless they join the club. So there are other organizations and other people willing to make this happen, as well as I would like to point out that I do appreciate everything that the club has done for the range, but I'd also point out the club was in charge of the range and now we're here. We bought a lot of wants. We didn't buy the needs. And that's why I've been to a lot of other shooting ranges. Their berms are much taller than ours and more sufficient. The club was in charge of that. Why are our berms so small and deficient?
Madam Chair, I'd like to address that specifically. We were not in charge of that. That's not club property, it's city property.
Mr. Girolani?
Sean Gelani for the record. The agreement that was established back in 2000 says that the club would maintain the range, correct?
It does?
Okay, so would that not be your responsibility?
No, it was never
Would it
never
not be your
articulated to the.
responsibility in the club to maintain that the berms are the proper height and that the erosion that would need to be fixed, and say, I realize you guys don't have heavy equipment, but maybe that should be brought to the city's attention, or at least to Parks and Recs, to say, we have an issue here at Bay 1 where we're having excessive erosion. Could we get somebody out there to fix it? Not wait till the very end, and now we have to close it because of some non-tangible evidence. Is it?
How about, what I'd really like to do is stick to this agreement right here, and that we go through, and maybe in help, we would all as a group look at page 1, and does anybody have any comment, recommended changes, or anything on page 1? I think if we stick to the scope and agenda item, we can move through what we need to accomplish today. So does anyone have any comment, changes, or thoughts on page 1 of the agreement? Okay. We'll move on to page 2, which we've already discussed, that the 5 hours under B would be changed to 4. Is that correct, Mr. Carver? I just want to make sure we did read that in your letter.
We're amenable to that.
Okay. How about the idea of set, a first and third, which you could pick, a second and fourth, that you would pick the 2 Sundays so that we'd have a regular schedule?
Absolutely.
Okay, so regular schedule. Is there some other comments or thoughts on that by other members? Nick?
Nick Fontanez for the record. I don't think we can do the 2 days, or it's my opinion of the group that we can do the 2 days, because at this point, the range is so restricted to everyone, not just your club, that we need to make this as fair as possible for the public. That includes everybody. I understand that we do have some reciprocity to lend out to you guys. I feel like I really tried to do that last meeting. I really felt like I was fair. And I really still feel back on the firm the 1 day a month until this solution is fixed, because it's a problem for everybody. So I really think that that was fair enough. Thank you.
Chair.
Member Bonkowski?
So we should discuss at this point with the extended daylight hours, the use of the landfill, and this will be coming up later today, but since we're talking about it now, the ability for the club to have the range on a Sunday, but possibly one weeknight a week, one weeknight a week, in addition to the Sunday use, and if that would be adequate to accommodate any matches that you might have.
I don't know without checking with the membership, but just off the cuff, I would say it is not. Our membership is just like everybody else. Weekends are primarily the family activity day, and that is where we seek our recreational opportunity. If you look at the range calendar, the people that are asking to book at night are commercial entities, and that has nothing to do with what we want.
So Jennifer Budge, what if it was open any night, so it could be a Saturday night? The landfill's clear by 5:30 when it's late until 9 o'clock. Maybe in addition to what we've talked about, you could have an opportunity to do an evening shoot.
I'd have to talk to the members to see whether they'd be
I'm just
willing to
saying
do that.
more than what we're proposing, so it gives you another opportunity. Just
Okay.
an option.
Nick Fontanez for the record, this is, could the public shoot then at night? Because this is what this is about. I want to keep this as
We're
fair as
gonna-
possible.
We're going to discuss that on the other agenda item,
okay.
but I think that's where we're going. That's the whole objective. So the first issue to decide here is as a group, whether we want to recommend, remember, this is making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors as to whether we want this agreement to say twice each month on set Sundays for 4 hours, or whether you want it to be once each month on Sunday for 4 hours. And really looking for comments from, I'm looking.
I would
Mr. Ellis.
recommend that it is 2 Sundays. Again, that would give us 2 opportunities to run 2 matches. Oftentimes, although we have requested 50% of the covered and the uncovered, many matches do not require that level. Some of the matches, depending on which ones would go forward, could be operated in a smaller subset of that. However, if we had a reservation and we were at full capacity, we would at least have the open spots. Once it's determined that the club would not need those on those 2 occasions, we would then open those up to the public and condense down into whatever we did need.
Other thoughts from members of the committee?
I like it.
Which answer? The,
Be some flexibility. Whereas he said you would have the range, theoretically half the range, or whatever part of the range, but half the range. And then when you're not shooting there, for whatever reason, different venue, a different match, then it could have a flexibility of opening it up to a wider audience, as it were.
Does anybody else?
Just on this flexibility, Steve Robinson, on this flexibility issue, when would you know and be able to notice the public that there is flexibility? And how much, I mean, how would the public know about that, and how much time ahead of your actual use would you know that?
It would not be ahead of time. It would be known at the time when, generally for a match, it's first come, first serve. You know, as people come up and sign up and register, 30 minutes before the match would begin, we would have a good idea of how many people are going to attend. So if we have 20 bays, we have 10 covered, 10 uncovered. Very few times in the past has a match utilized that much space. However, it's good to, if we do, now that we're condensing things, it's always wise to make sure that we would have that flexibility. But once the match starts, it's set. That's the number of shooters. If we have 10 shooters, well, then we don't need all 20 lanes. We only need half of that number.
Understand, but then I'd have to be out there physically to know.
Yes, you would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Budge?
We could add a sentence. I mean, this isn't a final agreement. It's going to go to the Board of Supervisors, but we could add a sentence that says if, during their matches, if they don't have capacity, that they make those other, spots of that part of the range available to the general public. I mean, we could come up with some sentence that would accommodate that flexibility.
Mr. Carver?
Chris Carver again. I understand the frustration that everybody's experiencing, and that's probably more so because we're taking heat out on the range. But here's the bottom line, is that for me, at the last meeting, the issue got confused because there was some misunderstanding about what it was that we were asking for, how many days, hours, and the space. I wrote a document, made a graphic to clarify that, so it's more, in my view, it's more than fair. We're asking for less than 10% of the hours that we put in there every 2 weeks. That doesn't account for anything else the club is doing, which is primarily enabling commercial access to the range. So I think the club, just in dollar amounts, is providing an extraordinary value to the city. And as I said last time we met, that we are the sole enabling capability that allows the public to access the range. No other organization has approached this club, or to my knowledge, the city, and asked to help. Nobody. Individuals, yes. But none of these commercial activities, no other social organization has asked to assist with safety operations at the range. And you're talking about going to evening hours on the range. You're asking right now, we know why the bullets are leaving the range. Part of, maybe that has something to do with design, probably less, in my view, 10%. It's primarily shooter behavior. You want to open the range in the evening with free range shooting, then you have to count on bullets leaving the range. And I don't know where you're going to be in 6 months if you get the improvements or not. If you don't have the ability to keep that improper shooting behavior from happening, bullets are going to land in the landfill. It's as sure as I'm sitting here. So I want to be clear about what we're trying to do with the city, the benefit that we're giving to the public, and why I wrote the letter that I did. And it's not because I'm trying to do an end run. It's because what happened here at the last meeting was not clear. Thank you.
Okay, so on page 2, I also would like to discuss and clear up any issue, because I do think we have difference of opinions on the RSOs. So I need this to be very clear, and we may need to, again, put something in the contract so that it is clear. An RSO can be trained by anyone that meets the NRA certification requirements. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then the opinion is, if I have a volunteer that has a certification for RSO, do they have to be a club member to volunteer their services? Because I think it is accurate that we have individuals that are RSOs in the community that would like to volunteer so that we can do a later item maybe of extended hours. And yet, so the club manages them, so what would they do? Just contact the club and show their certification, and then you'll put them in the volunteer schedule?
It would not be covered under our insurance. And you're asking us to manage a
asking.
volunteer force?
They could become a member,
Do
That
they
is-
have to? That's the question. Is it mandatory that the RSO become a club member? And what is the fee to be a club member?
It's $20 a year to join the club. And to be covered our insurance, they do have to be a member.
So it behooves them to become the member. So let me ask the question, can they become a member without paying the $20 fee if they're going to be a volunteer RSO?
No.
Okay. So all of your RSOs are paying the $20 membership fee?
Yes.
Okay. So the question really then is for us, because that's where I've heard the rub in the community, is that there is people that would like to volunteer, but they don't want to be a member of the club. I'm trying to ascertain, really, is $20 such a barrier to someone volunteering to help with the RSO situation? Or is it purely the fact they don't want to be a member of the club? So I'm trying to get the nuance there.
Sean Gerlani for the record. I think what the issue kind of was, part of it was those groups wanting to, one, establish their own insurance through the city to kind of do their own thing and not everything be directed through the Carson Rifle Pistol Club. Because my understanding is they also do the scheduling as well. Right? And there's one organization that I believe the gentleman is a member of the club, but he's scheduled all the way out to November 1st of 2024. So that seems a little unrealistic. But if the question is, if you want to be an RSO and you have your own group of shooters in your own club, can that club attain their own insurance from the city to do their own activity without going through this third party?
So unless I'm reading something wrong, that club group would have to have their RSO and make a reservation, right? So nothing's stopping a group from making a reservation and providing their own RSOs. They just wouldn't be covered under the club's insurance. They have to produce their own insurance.
Correct.
And we do that today and have always
do.
done that. And this contract is not going to infringe upon that right. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just
Can
want
I
to,
make a comment
wanna make
about
sure.
the reservations? They can put it on the books for the next 20 years. This agreement is only for 6 months. So essentially, the reservation calendar as is for the next 6 months, as it is now. They're managing the reservations. They're taking a lot off the city. I don't have the staff or the financial resources to make the reservations, to provide range safety officers and provide that. So they are providing us with a valuable service. So at the end of the 6 months, hopefully we'll get some improvements. I mean, we're going to be looking at the operation of the facility, how the reservations are, everything. So I think everything will be on the table. This is just for the next 6 months. So I don't want to worry about what's on the calendar beyond that, because to me, it's not
Realize that, but it
tangible
gives
right
that-
now.
It gives the appearance that, see, the general public doesn't know what you just said. So it gives the general appearance now to the public that, oh, well, if this group can go do that all the way out for 4 years, what's the point? So that information is not being conveyed.
Well, we could put something in the agreement that the reservation calendar is just to reflect the term of the agreement or something.
Okay.
Would that give you some comfort?
Yeah.
I mean, you can
would
just hide the rest.
You
It's for
can't,
now.
and if you want to fill this room with angry shooters, that's how you do it, is not give them the ability to plan their, and I think we're talking about IDPA that has booked bays out months and years in advance so they can keep their organization intact. It is the same issue that my club has, is that we don't have a place to shoot. They don't either. So giving us the ability to plan, which is what we're trying to do, gives the organization flexibility. And without that, if you make a 6-month agreement, IDPA is, I'm dealing with another issue with them right now, trying to get them access that they need. They're a community of shooters, just like us. And the thing for us is that there are people in the IDPA that are also a member of the club that also provide RSO services. So there's some mutual benefit to all of this. So.
Very testy. My business, I have to be able to shoot during the week. We don't usually shoot on weekends at all because it's crowded. But our business depends on being able to test guns. Plus, we've got 3 or 4 people that have concealed weapons businesses. So how do we handle that when, frankly, I don't know whether I got a problem until Tuesday afternoon. The guy wants a $5,000 gun, but I can't ship it.
so those ones, Mr. Tessie, we were doing with the frangibles, and they could make, if you had an RSO and your own insurance and you were using frangibles, we were allowing the commercial classes to accommodate that.
Time lapse in 57 or 58. And the ensuing 60-some years, I really do know how to do this, and safety and that kind of thing. But do I have to go to the club and pass your exam? Really? I had no idea he liked me that much.
Well, I think we have a future item on the agenda to talk about other opportunities to shoot at the range for the public. So that would probably be the best time to make sure that he's clear on opportunities that he might be able to have in addition to what we have right now.
What's the general consensus on the calendar issue?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bronkowski.
I can support the 2 Sundays a month because half of the range, plus, right, plus the bays, plus the short range would all still be available. So we're talking about 4 hours, 2 days a week for half of the long range.
2 Sundays a month.
2 Sundays a month.
Set Sundays.
Sorry, I wanted.
Right,
Established Sundays.
right. So considering that the majority of the range would still be open to the public during those hours, I can support this.
I have a dumb question. Why are we worried about having RSOs on the range on after hours when the pit is closed? Who cares if a bullet blasts out of there and lands over in the dump when there's nobody there? So why are we even wasting our time haggling this around? The only time that we need to have RSOs out there is when the range is in operation.
When the landfill is in
I mean,
operation.
when the landfill is in
That's okay.
operation, yeah, sorry.
I-
So why are we wasting our time?
Well, we're gonna stick to the contract discussion right now, and then we can talk about that on the extended hour agenda item. So let's try and just go through on the contract. So we're looking to say that we're gonna change item B, and the club has, I believe, agreed that it would be regularly scheduled for 2 Sundays and only 4 hours instead of the 5 hours.
Correct.
I believe some of us aren't quite happy that it'll go to 4 hours, but we're gonna have to come to an agreement on that. And that this is a 6-month contract. I believe Mr. Carver asked, where are we going after the 6 months? And I think that, it's a valid question. I think that we have some that are working on some of the committees that will be reporting out some options that'll help tell you more clarity of where we want to go over the 6 months after this contract.
This kind of goes to Bob's question, but this is the club's primary concern. If we're providing RSOs that are basically docents for the range, safety education to allow shooting operations, but the range isn't open where that risk is necessarily mitigated. If a round leaves the range on Sunday, it's not going anywhere. But why are we putting so much emphasis on training the public and ensuring we have satisfactory operational model so we can abandon it in 6 months and go back to you can do whatever you want as long as we don't catch you? Not we, the city. All right, so I understand his point. I don't want to make an investment for the club to provide this level of expertise out on the range if it's going to be abandoned in 6 months. So that's why I'm asking, where are we going? If we're going to continue some type of shooter education program, then the club would like to be a part of that. I think that we're more than qualified to do that. If we're just going to walk away and nobody's at risk on a Sunday, why are we doing this at all?
I think our objective, once again, though, is to open the range even when it is in operations, which is where you'd want your RSOs and your training. So I think the objective of everyone here is to get back to 7 days a week and have it operate while the landfill is open. And so I'm not so sure you need it necessarily an RSO on the Sundays right now, but the objective is to start teaching the public range safety. And so that would then carry over when we're open 7 days a week during the landfill opening. I think that's our goal is to, right? We're trying to get to 7 days a week while the landfill is open. And so then the question really is, are we anticipating keeping RSOs after the work is done? And that's really the question. Are we going to keep RSOs once the range is open full-time? Is that our objective?
Can I jump in? Thank you, Madam Chair. Jennifer Budge. So I think I think Chris is dead on. We need that shooter education component to continue into the future. And I know that city staff, at least in the Parks and Rec department, are on board with helping promote that. The more education we provide people wherever they're shooting is going to be helpful. And we want to provide that, whether it's meeting space, whether it's cooperative programs, whether it's a video they watch online, whether it ends up being a kiosk on site. There's a multitude of options that could happen. And I think that's in everyone's best interest, is to educate proper shooting behavior, especially how to shoot at this range specifically, because it's not exactly like every other range. Once we make those physical improvements, that will help. But I do want to point out the reason there's RSOs right now, even when the landfill is closed, is because there's identified issues with conflicts among the ranges themselves outside of the landfill. We want to educate people how to notice, look, we don't have any lateral berms here. You really need to be, wait till it's cold, then go out and change your target. Just educate people. We have a lot of novice shooters out there. There's a lot of really well-educated people, and they do help people that come out that are new. But we need to educate as many people as possible, and I think that's in everyone's best interest. So I would hope that that would continue, and I know my staff is committing to the club that will help provide that in the future, even past this agreement.
Judy?
Yeah, Steve Schutte. Assuming that we're fortunate enough to get this range back functioning 7 days a week, I don't think we can expect the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club to volunteer to be out there Monday through Monday for free. So I don't know where we're going with, I'm sure Mr. Carver can't commit his club members out there at that kind of time.
And that's why we're only talking about 6 months. We need 6 months of help until we can make those improvements and have a new operational structure that is yet to be determined. And we're going to work on that together. But no, that's not the intent. I don't want to tax that club. It's a volunteer group. We're already taxing them more than they can handle now. And I think that's too much to expect. But we need their help right now until we can get some improvements done on site.
Mr. Girolani?
Sean Gelani for the record. I was under the understanding that the NDOW was going to provide some education
That's
on
one of the
the
options.
hunter safety aspect, the gun safety, and certainly they would have the certified, qualified people. When you mentioned that your members are experts, I would question the certification of those. When you start using the term expert, it kind of opens up Pandora's box for.
I said expertise,
No, you mentioned the word expert probably 6 times at the last meeting.
expert shots.
Experts. And it concerns me when that term is used, because you're kind of putting out there that they're at a level of training higher than John Q, but just because they pay $20 to become a member and go to an RSO class does not make them an expert in firearms. That's where I'm going at. And it's not just that, but since we're talking about the RSOs and whatnot, what level of training is the public going to get versus from the club, as opposed to the level of training that you get from, say, NDOW?
Nick Fontanez for the record. I want to clarify on that myself. I'm the one who said that because what I was trying to do originally in the original motion was get them out there on a Saturday to get them their 2 days. But when we all agreed that they couldn't be out there on a Saturday, that's when we had amended it down to 1. I was the one who had said they were shooters above the layman because there was an RSO out there all the time and they were part of the club, which is why the liability was less for them to shoot on a Saturday, was because there would be an RSO watching them at all times, and it was a very controlled firing line. That was where that whole expertise thing came, was I just simply mentioned with the controlled firing line and then being at an organized shoot that there wasn't as much liability for the city as having John Q go out there and just put some rounds into a target. So I wanted to clarify that before you had to speak again.
Let's move on to, does anybody have anything on page 3? Member Bonkowski.
Paragraph 2A on page 3, line 4, it should be section 11, not section 14.
Did you catch that, Ben, so that you know this should be section 11, not 14. Okay, anybody else have anything on page 3?
Same correction on page 5, under paragraph 10.
section 11. Did you catch that right here? Okay. And we're going to add in, on page 4, in section 7 on the insurance, we're going to just add a clarifying comment that they can't just send us the notice of cancellation within the 10 days and be in compliance, that they have to actually continue the insurance or it'd be a breach. Brad?
Also on page 4, under paragraph 6D, I have some concerns about just getting the written consent of the director for improvements. I'd like to discuss changing that line so it reads, CRPC may, at its expense, alter or modify the range by providing provided that improvement plans are provided and approved in writing by the director, so that we get a copy of the proposed improvements, plans of the proposed improvements first, and that those are approved in writing by the director. Otherwise, there's not going to be a paper trail of what's being done and who did it.
So the proposal has to be in writing, and then the director has to approve it in writing.
And there's 2 Ds, so that's,
That's part of the other problem. There's
So
D and D.
yeah.
Right.
So
We'll
it'd
fix
be
that
E.
as well.
It'd be E, not D.
Right.
But it would be
And then
changed
E
so that
would
they'd have
become
to
F.
provide improvement plans, which would then be approved in writing.
Does that make sense? But everybody, if there's ever anything as we're going through that you have an objection to, Mr. Carver, let us know. Okay. And then on page 5, we had the correction to section 11. I'm looking for anybody to give me any heads up if they have something else. And then on page 6, anything? Okay. Then, is there any comment from the public of anything that they saw in this agreement that they thought we should address? Just wanted to make sure that the public had a chance to weigh in on the agreement too. Okay. Ms. Budge, did you see anything else that you thought we should have addressed? Okay. Members? Then I will accept a motion on this item. Mr.
Member
Hillis?
Hillis, make a motion to approve and recommend the draft move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the draft cooperative agreement between Carson City and Carson Rifle and Pistol Club with the amendments that we just discussed.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the cooperative agreement between Carson City and the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club as discussed on the record today. Any discussion on the motion? Just making sure and there, we had approval by the club. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? 1, 2 noes? Okay. The no is Mr. Fontaine and Mr. Girolani. Okay, then the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to item 3B, which is direction from the staff or recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding Carson City Rifle Range budget, grants, and future projects. Ms. Budge and Mr. Navarro. Thank you.
Potpourri of items, if you will, but I wanted to just let you know all the progress we've made since the last meeting and kind of where we're going. So first, to start with design and engineering services, we were able to negotiate with Loomis and Associates a significantly less expensive design and engineering, and this also included site survey, which the first quote didn't even include and was significantly higher. They're actually out there on site today They're doing all the on-site survey work. They're flying the site with a drone. Are doing all kinds of good data collection starting today. We anticipate about 3 to 4 month duration for the full process for design and engineering. So for this.
3 to 4 months?
At most, yeah. It'll probably be less. But this is also a pretty busy season for engineering services. So we're excited to get that, and I just want to point out that's a more than $46,000 investment by the city into the facility. So the city's very committed to seeing this project move forward and making the range open and available, and this is a necessary first step. So you have a copy of the scope of work in your packet, and it's only the tasks 1 through 4, so it's not the entire quote that was awarded. And if you have any questions on that scope of work or what they're doing, I'm happy to try to answer those questions for you.
So, I do. You just, okay, just, Brad.
So Jen, although they are surveying the entire site, are they going to be able to expedite the work on certain portions, such as the bays? So are we still going to be able to get the bays open in 30 days in the short range? I'm just trying to get an idea of not only the time for the design, but for when the work will be done and the range is back open.
So we have a couple things going on concurrently. I'm going to have to jump into the grant application that we submitted. So we submitted a grant application to ENDO that's also in your packet, just a portion of the grant application's in your packet, and that would cover the remaining physical work that needs to be done on the bays and the backstop of the short range. Also the signage component. Signage obviously isn't required to get it open, but it was something that they're able to fund, and it was on our wish list. They weren't able to fund the Iron Rangers and the envelopes and some of those other great ideas that we wanted to implement, but it's just not eligible for the grant funding. I was hoping that Aaron was going to be here to see when those grant funding might be available realistically. A lot of times they put timeframes in the grants, and that's not really when they become available. So I don't have a hard timeframe for the grant funding, but we did include those projects in that. Loomis is taking a different approach than what Pogemeyer did. Pogemeyer wanted to do 3 sets of design. They wanted to do each range independently. Loomis wants to do one massive grading plan, which has been suggested by a lot of the members of this committee as well, that it's a better approach to figure out where your borrow areas and everything like that. I can talk to them about prioritizing those areas to give us a cost so we can go out to bid for those. I also do have, as far as funding for the physical improvements, we have to be able to fund that. I had $250,000 identified in the capital improvement budget, which I was hoping to utilize for a match to a future NDOW grant. Because it requires a 25% match, we could essentially, as long as there's funding available, which it sounded like from Mr. Keller's previous comments, that we could turn that $250,000 into potentially $1 million grant and a big project. So while that doesn't quite answer, I think you're looking in the next 30 days, are we going to get this done? I want you to know there's a lot of moving parts and we're trying to move forward. So I want to try to resolve everything, but I need to have that engineering done on the bays first. I can ask them to prioritize that portion and give us 60% of that first and see if that's feasible.
Right.
But the approach that they want is more holistic at looking the entire site, because we're not going to have enough dirt on site. I know it seems like we have plenty of dirt, but we're really not, because the top of the backstops need to have a certain type of material, and that's not the material that's out there. It can provide the 90% of the structure, but not the 10% on the top, if that makes sense. So we'll need quantities and cost estimates for that piece.
So if you can find out if they can prioritize, because I don't want to wait potentially 3 or 4 months just to find out that, we're going to have another 3 or 4 months just to get the pistol bays open. I mean, at least the more of the range that we can get open, the fastest, the better for all of us. I'm sure you're tired of getting phone calls and letters too.
I'll follow up with them and get that answer for you.
Mr. Hillis?
I had just a question. 2 meetings ago, I believe it was the direction of this task force to investigate utilizing city staff, material, and equipment to make the minimum recommendations and minimum modifications to the pistol base to get those open. Where are we at in that process?
We're at the design and engineering of those improvements right now.
Okay,
So Loomis is hired to draw that picture of what needs to be constructed, so we meet that minimum standard. I don't want to go out there and just guess, because that's what's been done in the past, and then this is where we're at. We need to make sure that things are compacted, that they're the right height. I mean, we just need to be able to do that. And they'll provide us cost estimates as part of their scope of work on what that's going to be. How much dirt do we need? How much, we need some guidance
I understand the
with
design
that.
standards, but I believe that the, minimum heights compaction standards were identified in both of the reports. If they weren't, then I apologize, but I thought that at least on that portion, we had a direction and a pathway to at least open the pistol base. So, but I understand the
Yeah,
response.
you know what I mean? So I'm not trying to put you off. I definitely want to provide that. And we'd have to go back to, Public Works and get into their schedule too. And then we have to pay for that. So we'd have to figure out the funding piece of that. And I'm not saying that's not doable. It probably is. But I just want to make sure that they get a set of plans, so we're building to that set of plans
Okay.
and not asking it to be eyeballed.
Mr. Tully?
I want to go shoot right now. After I leave here, I want to go shoot. What have we done to fix it? Can I go shooting? Can I go?
Well, I know you want to get out there, and I want you to get out there. But we have 2 reports that have put us on written notice that we have some issues. And we need to make sure that we're taking steps to address those.
You made a comment that was completely wrong. You said, I don't want to go out to the range and get shot. Excuse me?
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
Would you please help him to make sure the microphone's green around thank you, so that can be
But
recorded.
at any range, any way, I asked the head of the Rifle Pistol Club if I needed to take their exams. No, well, okay. Being as I by far have more experience than anybody in the room. I've been at this my whole life. From the time I was 20 years old, and I'm almost 80. So I asked him about the test procedures and that kind of thing. But as far as I know, I don't know how to take that test procedure.
So
Sorry.
I can clarify that point.
Mr. Hillis?
For a member of the public or a commercial entity who wishes to reserve one of the bays at the range, there's a frangible ammunition requirement, there's an insurance requirement, and an RSO requirement, is my understanding. Is that correct? During operation of landfill hours. The RSO requirement is an NRA certification. It's not, the club is not administering, we don't put out an exam. That's an official classification by the NRA.
But the NRA doesn't do anything about that. Today, I want to go out to the range. How does the NRA get involved? The NRA is not out there.
No, the NRA is not involved. They are the minimum certification requirement for a range safety officer.
I want to go shooting.
Then I would recommend scheduling yourself for an RSO class and providing the necessary documentation to the city.
And any of the people that are teaching. I've been on the cover of
I understand.
almost 20 magazines over the last 60 years. And so, as far as I know, I don't know what it's in that
We might be able to find some members of the public that maybe could partner with you and go out with you. We could do something like that. There's a lot of certified range safety officers in the community, not necessarily members of the club, but that might want to go out with you. I know there's many local businesses that have it, and I'm sure we could probably partner up someone with you to make that happen.
Oh, yeah, I don't mind taking a test or something. But the point is that I have no access. I guess I gotta get online and find out some way to take this test.
To receive the certification, you mean, for an RSO?
Because if you're not gonna let me shoot if it's only me, who am I supervising? And I'm a nice guy.
I think you are.
You see what I'm saying? If I'm going out to test a gun, why do I need an RSO with me? It's only me. And I promise not to do anything radical. And there's never been an accident out on that range that, the last problem I saw was some kids shooting their uncle. And that was more than 20 years ago. And it's an uncontrolled range, and it does real well. Talking about insurance, it's been doing real well for years and years and years and years. Just like it is. I go out there, you go out there. I make sure you have your ear protection and your safety glasses. But I can't get to the range because the way you guys got it set up now, I can't get to the handicap. And you guys got $40,000 tied up of your tax money to put that ramp in just for me. But you're saying that you got to shoot the bays and can't shoot the pistol line. Is that not right?
I'm sorry. I think we're going to need just a little bit of clarification. So we have
Me or
to
from you?
understand the question, because first of all, you have the open time on Sundays. Are you indicating that it's not accessible to you on Sundays? That you
On
can't,
Sunday,
that you're
it might
unable
be.
to
Yes,
shoot?
on Sunday it might be. I can drive up and, yeah, but there's an awful lot of people there. So it takes a long time. I work
Get your
7
turn.
days a week. So it takes a long time to get up and shoot. I would prefer an open shooting day, which I could come up, run out, put the targets, test the gun.
I believe that they're on the agenda, I'm sorry.
To extend our hours.
That's right.
So
It's going
if
to be
we can
discussed.
hold this item until that agenda item?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
Okay,
don't mean
that's
to-
okay. We were just trying to clarify what you were talking on, and I think we can address it when we get to that agenda item, if that will work for you, okay? So I agree with Mr. Bonkowski on the Loomis items that, so if I can clarify with Ms. Budge, are you saying that the Loomis actual contract that was provided to them, what was the completion date in the actual contract with Loomis?
I didn't bring the contract with me. I'm sorry. I could email that to you after the meeting, though.
So I'm with Mr. Bonkowski and probably all the members of this committee that put the pedal to the metal and let's try and make sure that we're pushing, because if I heard you correctly and that I'm seeing that Loomis would be 3 to 4 months, I'll need the date because I don't know when they actually started. So I'm now putting my mind here saying that's a completion date of estimated maybe June 1st. And then you would be letting potential bids out for the work, and part of it will correspond with the grant, because the pieces of the work are in that. So like you said, they're a little commingled here, but am I looking at, from your estimate, that we might not get it open then till, I think I saw on the grant
If
that
we're
you
gonna wait for
indicated.
the grant, I mean, we just submitted for their last grant cycle. So, I mean, that was like not even 30 days ago.
Right.
So
I'm
if
trying
we
to-
have to wait for another grant cycle for another year, our design will be well in advance of that. But if we have cost estimates and can go out to bid on pieces of it, we could piece that apart if the city can fund those portions without the grant funding. I don't want to lose our match either.
Well, I'm not interested in waiting a year to get this open, so I need to be very clear.
Yep.
I don't want to lose the entire summer and the season for the public to be able to utilize.
And Loomis is well aware this is a high priority. They're in town, they're part of this community, they want to see it open as well. They're on our side with trying to get results oriented with that, which is why we had a contract turnaround a week from when we received the quote, which is pretty fast, as the city typically goes. And they're out there today. I mean, they're anxious to get this going. So, and we only have 1 week turnarounds, I think we discussed with reviewing plans, and we want to have as many people review those as much as possible and get things moving. So I can follow up with them, and I can give you, the contract, and it probably goes beyond when their deliverable will be, because if you ever had change orders or things like that to the contract, you typically make that longer. But I don't have a Gantt chart or a schedule for the project yet, because it's literally just starting. So I can get that back to you, and as soon as I have it, I can email out a whole schedule for this to the entire task force.
Thank you. And again, I really appreciate, I think we should put on the record that it's really tough for Parks and Rec involved in all of their scheduling and all of the work that they have to get accomplished, that they're really working hard to accommodate this. And so I do want to put that on the record. I know it's difficult for us as the range. We see only the range, and we're trying to push the pedal so that we can all get out there and shoot again. So I appreciate all the work that you're trying to do, and I want you to use this committee, and if we have to put to where we go to a 2-week meeting, if there's anything we can do to actually help get something reviewed or done, is it?
We'll probably reach
More
out
or
to
less
certain members
helpful for
outside
you.
of that, so we can get
Okay.
things turned around quickly would be just the most helpful. And we'll make sure the club's part of that too, especially on design for the long range.
So that it's imperative that we're firing on all cylinders. How's that for a good words here?
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Mr. Robinson?
Steve Robinson, just as, I guess, further clarification for the public, and I know, Jennifer, how difficult it is to date and say when this is going to be done, but are we not looking at 3 or 4 months down the road before meaningful change takes place physically at the range?
So the 3 to 4 months is for design and engineering services. I'm going to go back to Loomis and see if they can prioritize at least the bays. And then we'll work with Endo and Mr. Keller to see what the status is of our grant application and when that might be available, because that does include, funding the physical portion of that. So if we can get that moving forward right as soon as engineering's done, I mean, that would be just depending on when that timing is available. And then we don't have to worry about fronting any money, but I think the city would make the funding available at least for those small portions. And then, but we'd have to put these things out to bid, the bigger picture.
Understand. I just don't want the perception out there that next month this is going to be done, because it does not sound like that's going to happen.
When I'm looking at the agenda item then, what this group, what recommendations this group could be making to the Board of Supervisors. Is there any? That's what we're gonna need.
Madam Chair,
For trash,
one possible recommendation would be for this group to ask the city to pre-fund some activities from Q18 money to be reimbursed from grant funds. The issue with that, of course, is that if we didn't get the grant funds, we might be backing ourselves into a corner, but it may be possible to get a confirmation from NDOW on approval of grant funds before, or make the approval subject to that, but that might expedite the process by at least a few months.
I think I can put up 10,000.
So, Mr. Tussey, just to be clear, what you're saying is you can fund $10,000 towards the actual improvement work for the bays, or just in general across the whole project,
I
or?
didn't think I adequately. I still have to deal with my wife. But
I'm willing to take your money.
yeah, how do we do that? And where should, again, I keep thinking, we get this thing running,
That's what I'm,
but not on this. And remember my idea about putting little flowers out there to move the angle of the rifle range. And if there's something, I'm sure it's buried on all this paper, there's something wrong with the pistol range too. Again, can't we reorient it so that it's shooting deeper into the mountains rather than deeper into the landfill?
okay.
Guess we'll know later.
Mr. Tussey, if I could have you work with me on the fundraising committee, I'll get with you offline to discuss an opportunity that as soon as we have Loomis's report and what funding, because they'll come up with engineer estimates, correct? And then it will be engineers' estimates for each section. So we would have the pistol bay, the short range, and the long range, and then we could work together from that to put together the funding opportunities. Brad, your thought process was that we would recommend funding be advanced out of Q18?
That we, being the city, could approve or authorize spending some Q18 money quicker than waiting for receipt of the grant funding, and then those funds would be reimbursed from the Q18 money.
I do want to remind you, it is a reimbursable grant program anyway, so we typically would do that. But it's just obviously expediting that, I think, is where he's coming from. NDOW has a reimbursable grant program anyway. You can, I think 50% through your project, get a reimbursement as far as cash flow goes, but it's reimbursable anyway.
I think I need just a little more clarity.
It allows us to start the work prior to receiving the grant funds.
So let me get just a little bit more technical. So if NDOW were to provide a grant, it's my general understanding that a grant starts from the notice of award date.
Correct.
I don't have any issue with where you're going to say we'll pre-fund and get the reimbursement, but it only starts from the notice of award date.
Especially match.
right?
So match can't be expended before the notice to proceed or notice of award.
And
I'll
current-
reach out to Mr. Keller, though, after this
See where I'm
meeting and
going
see
with
what our
this, Brad?
options might be as far as timing, because if we just had the one grant opportunity, if there's not an opportunity for another year, then I think we need to look at a plan B for the first phase, we'll call it, of improvements.
So I think if I can recall, we also had this person right here offer to put a sign with his name on it.
Yes.
I remember that.
I'd sponsor a bay.
Right, sponsor a bay.
And I think there were more people, sorry, Member Hillis, believe there were more people from other entities who made similar claims to that have attended these meetings in the past.
We could put a sponsorship policy together for the range, maybe for review. Would that be helpful?
I'd like to
Maybe
see that one come on
we
our
could have
next agenda
If
as
we
an
could have a
action item.
couple members help us with the content of that might help
Mm-hmm.
on some staff time. But to put a draft policy together for sponsorships, that'd be really helpful. We're
think we
working on one right
should
now
do that.
for Centennial Park, but haven't gotten too far yet.
Madam Chair. I think it would also be helpful to receive a recommendation from this work group to the Board of Supervisors to approve the $250,000 CIP request that's in the budget that we'll be voting on in 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that'd be and
Madam
it,
Chair, do you need a motion to make that recommendation?
for the 250,000.
Yes,
That we support as the range, the capital improvement for 250,000.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to
That-
make a motion then.
Just not quite ready, but
Oh.
almost ready.
I'm sorry.
Almost. I just want to is there anybody in the public that has any funding ideas or pieces they want to recommend to us? Is there any public comment on this item? Please come forward. Then we'll go to a motion. Close. Press the button and state your name, please.
Hi, my name is John Barrier, and I'm just a little bit, I'm trying to build in my mind a flow chart, if you will, about where we're going on this. So probably Jennifer could clarify all this for me. So as I understand it right now, there's a contract out with Loomis Engineering for an engineering survey of the range. That's in process right now, correct? Okay. So they're estimating a timeline to 3 to 4 months for that engineering survey to be completed, correct?
It includes design.
And that'll include design. And
Design and engineering.
okay,
The contract includes design and engineering services. Today, they're doing the survey work.
okay. And then simultaneously, you've applied for a grant from NDOW. Is that correct?
We've applied for a grant from NDOW. It's in the packet that's provided today, and it was including, it was a $38,000 grant request, and it included signage, it included dirt work for the shooting bays, and it included dirt work for the short range, just the backstop.
Okay,
And that included in-kind match from park staff to install all the signage and do as much site work as possible.
okay,
But it would be contracted out work,
all right,
whether Public Works or a third party.
all right. And then simultaneously, the city's going to ask to appropriate $250,000 for their 25% grant fund match?
For a additional future grant application
Okay.
for the remaining work that needs to be done at the range.
This grant with NDOW, how much is this for?
28,000.
28,000.
38,000, I think.
28, 38.
I thought
The
there were
current grant-
28 of it and we're 9
Yeah,
of the
so the
match.
total grant is $38,158.58.
Okay,
The request is for 28,000, so the difference is the in-kind match value.
okay. All right, all right. And then, once you get the engineering survey back and the money's been appropriated, you're going to put out to bid the range improvements?
We can.
Depends on what we get.
We need to
how
look,
much
we're
money
gonna
you
need to
got?
look at the estimates, and then the Board of Supervisors will probably have to provide some direction about how much funding they'll make available for those
Okay.
improvements.
All right. You can understand, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm
Oh,
just
no,
trying to
there's
figure
lots
this
of
out
moving
here,
parts.
but-
We have a
Yeah,
lot of
there-
moving
there's a
parts,
lot
and
of
we're just
wheels
trying to,
turning here.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, with some other members, I agree with them that you're talking maybe 3 to 4 months. Loomis Engineering is saying 3 to 4 months for the engineering survey.
Correct.
Okay. And then you're not anticipating any problems with the grant money?
For the current grant application?
Yes.
I'm not anticipating any issues. I haven't heard back from Endo, so I'm
Yeah,
not sure
I
what other
understand that.
applications there were who we're competing against. It is a
Okay.
competitive grant program.
I understand that. And then when the city is finally in a position to put out bids, how long do the bids take?
Typically, bids are out anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Because of the magnitude of this project, it would, and then we'd have to go back to the Board of Supervisors to be awarded, since it'll be over $100,000.
Okay. And then after that, work can finally begin in some capacity?
If we want to break it up into phases, we could always do that. If we want to do one big project, we could do that as well.
Oh, sure, yeah, I understand that. So,
If we had smaller components that were under $100,000, we could just get competitive quotes and do a contract.
sure, yeah, I understand.
So if we did just the bays and it was only, say, $50,000 and the funding was available, we could just get a couple competitive quotes and get the work done.
All right.
That would be the quickest way.
So we're looking at possibly 6 months from now before the bids go out?
4 months for the
three-
bids, if
three-
Loomis takes the whole 3 months, it depends.
3 to 4 months for the bid.
Before we could
4
go
to
out
6
to bid.
weeks for, I'm sorry, 3 to 4 months for the engineering study.
Correct.
4 to 6 weeks for the bids to go out. So that's approximately 6 months.
So I want to clarify the Loomis, and they're not just doing a study and we're going to get a nice report that's going to go on a shelf. We're getting actual construction plans.
All right, yes.
So
I
that way
understand.
that's what we're going out to, that's what we would go out to bid for. So we'll have, berm height requirements and where borrow areas are and how much fill needs to be imported, and all of those details is what Loomis is working on.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay.
All right. So, but I'm trying to build a timeline also that we're looking at approximately 6 months before the bids can go out, be awarded to do the actual physical work out there.
If we did one massive project, if we broke it out into separate items, like I said, we could just get a couple quotes if it's under $100,000 and then just get the work done.
All right.
It's much quicker. When you do a full bid award, we have to follow state guidelines, so it's a little bit more
Okay.
time intensive, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. And then time allowance for the work to be done. So we're looking at possibly out to 7 to 8 months. Correct?
Depending on how we go.
Oh, I
Yeah.
understand.
Uh-huh.
I understand. I mean, there's 6 speeds here, slow, slower, slowest, stop and reverse and start all over again. I understand that. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're
I just
welcome.
wanted to get a timeline. Thank you.
That's why we're pushing as much as we can to
I-
get it faster.
Well,
Yeah,
I
you're right.
appreciate that, but if you watch the news up in Reno area, they've always had trouble with target shooters up in that area. And the reason they're having
Fires.
trouble with target shooters is that because these guys don't have anywhere to go.
That's right.
And
You
if we
trade.
don't get this range eventually open as soon as possible, we're going to have a similar problem down here.
We trade our risks.
Yes, I
That's
understand
correct.
that. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Girolani?
Sean Gerlani for the record. Jennifer, I have just to clarify, this thing with Loomis, is this for the entire upgrade process? Or is it just for the items that we needed to get this thing off the ground and get it moving? There was, 2 or 3 items, Mr. Bonkowski, that were,
It's in your minutes.
It was the items required to open, and you have the scope of work in your packet, but it's not for the entire wish list in both range
Okay,
evaluations.
that's what I want.
It's not. It's the items that are needed to
just
open
those
the
3
facility
line
for each
items.
range, yes.
okay.
If you look in your minutes, she provided us from our last meeting, the primary needs, immediate tasks required to open the range, 1, 2, 3 for each of the sections is all lined out. And then our secondary and then our long-term. Just if you were,
That's 1, 2, 3 would fit in this room.
there you go. Okay, so now I'm willing to take a motion. Thought we were just gonna do the
I'm
250,000,
not going to make a motion for an item that's going to come in front of me on the board.
right? Oh, no, he's not, oh, sorry, go ahead. Is that where the,
There's two items. It's the $250 CIP request is
Right.
currently in the budget. So it'd be a recommendation to approve the current request in the CIP budget for 250,000.
For FY '20.
That's the only budget we're hearing. Okay,
just for the CIP?
right.
Just- Can you push your mic? Thank you.
Sorry. I would make a motion to approve the use of the CIP $250,000 for fiscal year 20 for the improvements to the range.
Nick Fontanez, for the record, I second that motion.
So any discussion on the motion? Thank you. Seconded. Okay, I have a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors the expenditure of $250,000 for a capital improvement project for the Carson Rifle and Pistol Range as part of the FY '20 budget. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to, where are we now? C. Item 3C, discussion and possible action regarding directions to staff about expanding the hours for the
Madam-
range.
Madam
Ms.
Chair,
Fudge? Oh,
Madam Chair, there may be another possible recommendation,
oh,
motion for
further?
recommendation.
Oh, on the
For the
staff
Q18
position?
money?
Oh,
For the Q18 money? That was not part of the previous motion.
Okay. Oh, the park ranger position? Oh,
No, to authorize funding from Q18 for the potential future NDOW grant application? Is that as clear as mud? The item that we discussed earlier, that Jen's going to check into. Right, or grant reimbursement, right?
Do we need to make a motion?
I don't think emotions actually, the funding is to, this committee's recommending $250,000 for a CIP. I don't know that the particular funding source is necessary from this committee, unless you feel that's needed. I think we'll pick them apart when we get it at our end anyway, as to how much comes from what source.
Yeah, let's do that.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
We just, 250,000 unless somebody's, and then I'm gonna take up Nick and Mr. Tully's recommendations too. Okay? No, your wife might think so. When she gets home, or you get home. Okay, Ms. Budge on item 3C, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We just wanted to have a discussion and get your feedback on offering, considering that it's lighter later after daylight savings time. Right now, it's light until about 7:30. Soon, it's going to be light till about 9 o'clock. And we wanted to provide some additional opportunities for the public, the general public, to come and shoot at the range, thinking that the landfill is completely clear at 5:30. We might have potentially 5:30 to 7:30, and then eventually 5:30 to 9 available, maybe 2 days a week, 1 day a week, and utilizing our park rangers because they have recently been trained to become NRA certified range safety officers. Just recognizing that they have a lot on their plate. They're responsible for, patrolling and over 8,000 acres of parks, trails, and open space, and they close our facilities, all of our regional parks, the cemetery now. We have a lot of activities that they're responsible for, especially in the evening, but we wanted to try to make an opportunity available for the public utilizing them and not rely on the club solely for the general public. So we just wanted to get some feedback from you, and we can work with our ranger staff to see what our availability is, and trying to pick some standard days of the week that might be available so we can count on that. But our ranger staff does fluctuate. We have 2 full-time park rangers. We have a part-time seasonal park ranger. He is not a range safety officer and couldn't provide that service, but our full-time staff would maybe be able to assist.
Mr. Tussey?
Do I still need to go down and get a hunter safety or,
For this item, no, it would be for the general public, so you could come down without certification, and our park rangers would provide that function. So we're just looking at, offering another opportunity in the evenings for the public to just be able to come and shoot.
that'd be great.
So, Ms. Budge, so are you indicating something like it might be Wednesdays? Again, that we come up with something set so the general public can count on it and not have to run to a website or try and figure out, am I in or
That's
out?
our intent, and it's easier for us to schedule that way as well, and have that opportunity available for the public.
And when do you anticipate we can get this started? Come on, Dave, give us good news.
I'm gonna let David Navarro handle that piece, since he makes the staff schedules.
For the record, that's Dave Navarro, Park Operations Superintendent. I had an opportunity to talk to the park ranger and to talk to him about this idea and see, when they could possibly be able to do this, because obviously they'll have to go in at the beginning probably, and then maybe go in at the end. So we are currently working on a schedule that we can provide that. If I had to give you like days right now, it would probably be better. Days would be during the middle of the week, because our heavy activities for the open space, where we really have a lot of activities in the canyons, and then we have a lot of our sports programmings, and a lot of our big reservations are always on Fridays, Saturdays, and like Sunday. So those times for them are like really busy. So we're possibly looking at doing it sometime in the middle of the week where we're not quite as busy in those areas. So that's what we're looking at now, how soon that we can start. Well, if we're going to change their schedule at all, which we'll probably have to do like now, we at least have to give them like a 15 days like notice, like before we do that. So it's going to be at, if I were to go and talk to them today and change their schedule today, it would be like a minimum of 15 days. Okay, so just to give you like an idea.
Unless they just agreed to do it, right? You can't mandatorily change it.
Well,
15 days
even if they
notice?
do, yeah, even if they do like agree to, I still have to give them 15 days, and I have to notify HR, and then also like the CCA as well.
Brad?
Dave, you just mentioned something that I need to clarify. You said that the ranger could go in at the beginning of the time that the range opens, and then again at the end. But in this particular case, they'd have to be there the entire time because they're providing the RSO service. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So it's just to open the range and just open the gate.
Well, so I think and then that was actually brought up in discussion as well, as whether they would have to be there the entire time. And my discussion with them is like, because the landfill would be like closed, it would be, that risk would be like limited, so they wouldn't technically have to be there. But so that was my conversation with them. You guys necessarily wouldn't have to be there the entire time, but more just to make sure that the gate opened up. And then also when the gate like closed and make sure that if there's anybody in there after those hours to kind of like, hey, it's this area is closed.
So then to further clarify, why can't the third ranger also perform this duty? Because it doesn't sound like any of them need to be RSO certified to do this.
In my mind, they could probably go through and provide some education opportunities as people are setting up, provide some reminders. Please just make sure you're doing A, B, and C. Compliant with that on-site safety training, just provide some reminders for the public that show up. They can go shut a couple gates, come back, and check back in with the public. So they might provide some direction, but they're not going to be calling the line hot or cold. They're not going to be providing that, finite oversight. So it's just providing another opportunity, but making sure, they know someone's there and checking on them.
Right. So the third ranger could provide the service, they just wouldn't be able to then go down on the range and provide any education. But if the other two rangers were busy, the third ranger could still do it.
Of the week that, again, the public won't pretend it's Wednesday, I don't care, whatever day you tell us, but it would be set and it's 5:30 to 7:30, and then as the weather gets better or the daylight, maybe it's 5:30 to 8:30, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so in 2 weeks-ish,
Ish.
two and a
Sure.
half-ish, two and a half-ish, as soon as practicable? Okay, so it's like that idea? Well, it's more hours, anything we can get, we'll take it.
I
Mr.
have to show you my stinking badges or something?
Don't, it's public shoot. Back open to the public on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day Mr. Navarro works out with his staff. Okay,
Just a, sorry, Chairman, Madam Chair. If this is going to be, obviously, any opportunity to increase the frequency and open to the public, the better off we are. But if what we've or have described so far of their tasks are to open the gate, is it possible we could do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, during the middle? I mean, if they're opening the gate, closing it down, obviously they have other responsibilities, but I don't think those two tasks alone would prohibit, to be opening more than that.
I think it's wonderful, and I think Mr. Navarro will get with his staff. We might get lucky that we get 2 days out of it if he can use all three rangers in a format. Certainly, the more, the merrier. Right?
Correct.
Good. He's on the task. I don't want in our motion to command them to a certain number of days, just that they expand them to the greatest possibility, if that makes sense. Because he's going to have to do a few employee issues to deal with. So is there any public comment on this particular item? Okay, then I will accept a motion. Somebody wants to make a motion to extend the hours to the greatest extent possible. Giovanni?
Sean Jelani, for the record, I'd like to make a motion to expand the range hours as soon as possible from Mr. Navarro's aspect.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to expand the hours at the Carson rifle and pistol range to the maximum amount available when Mr. Navarro has a chance to get that schedule. Any further discussion? I did that already. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. And thank your staff already in advance. They're going to make a lot of people very happy.
Madam Chair, just
Will
a point
do.
of clarification. As this, if it takes approximately 2 weeks, that may be outside of our normal meeting time. Is that something that will be implemented seamlessly and we don't
Absolutely.
know
We've
further
already
action
made
from
the
us?
motion. We've already made the stuff. They'll get with staff
I
and
just wanted to
implement.
clarify.
Yeah,
We'll
they'll have to
do a
right.
press release once we figure out what that is, and we'll make sure you all get a copy of the press release.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, then we're going to move on to Agenda 4A, which is the director's report, please. Ms. Budge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I just wanted to let you know that we have a meeting on the calendar with BLM. Stephanie Hicks, the property manager, and myself will be meeting with them. And they also sent us a bunch of maps, which include all of the BLM land opportunities, including in Lyon County. So if there's other opportunities that we're not aware of, we're definitely looking at other options. And then we did put in a request to Lyon County to meet with them. Stephanie actually met with their planning staff. And then the city manager is amenable to having a discussion, but just asked that it be after the legislature. So we are moving forward and and working on those two avenues as you requested.
Any questions of Ms. Budge? Okay, then we're going to move on to item 5. Member Howe indicated to me she didn't have any further report on the signage. She's ill today, so she apologizes, but it's probably better for all of us that she didn't come. Member Girolani, any report on operations?
Sorry, Sean Gelani for the record. Going over the fees, I was approached by a member of the public here last weekend talking about an annual fee. And the question was brought up was, and how much would it cost? It's kind of hard to get that information. I did some research on the internet, but it was, like I said, it was difficult to gather that the cost of those card access boxes at the gate when you're coming into off a range road. The question was, could there be a annual membership fee for the range? Say $50 a year. And if so, that person could go in at any time, and you know, when that person swipes that access card, that, you know, John Doe came in on Tuesday at, 4:15, and, that person was on the grounds. But would that be possible, one? And the other would be that membership could extend to out-of-state members as well, but for a much higher fee. So as we discussed last time, an annual fee for Nevada residents would be $50, or Carson City residents $50, and go up from there. A daily access fee, $5 for Carson City resident, and depending on the agreement with Lyon County, if there's a later on issue of putting a range on Lyon County land, they probably would extend that to them as a courtesy. $7 for I should say $7 in general for Nevada residents, and a $10 access for out-of-state. That would be a daily access. So those are the ideas thrown out there. But again, if we need we talked about those little park cards, I guess like State Parks has for park access. If we could get those with the what do you call them, Iron Ranger or Metal Ranger, whatever it's called, that would be good, and that would help to build this financial base that we really need to get rocking. But that's, your funds are your area. But if we could move that quicker, that would be great. If you I don't know, what do you guys think about a controlled access card for an annual member? Some way to keep track of, do we need that card, or do you just pay a $50 annual fee, put a sticker on your windshield, or, so if a park ranger does go out there, he sees that sticker on your car and knows that you're an annual fee payer.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Hillis?
My recommendation would be as easy as possible. And one reason for that is when you start having computer access involved, who's going to maintain it? There's no power there currently. How are we going to obtain power? Solar generation, all these things add into the expense, and it may deter from our immediate goal, which is opening the range to everybody and getting the improvements done. So my recommendation would be keep it as easy and as cheap as possible. And if that's something down the road that, the city wishes to look at as it moves forward, great, but that would simply be mine.
Brad?
Two comments. First, I don't believe that a sticker for a car is the way to go, because I have multiple cars. So it needs to be able to, like a placard or it could be,
Okay.
it could be a card. But the problem with the card system, because I belong to a couple associations that use those cards, it's labor intensive because you have to have a staff person that's inputting the information into the computer database and then updating it and purging it every year and then collecting the fees every year. So it's much more labor intensive. So I don't know that I have an objection to it because I like the idea of being able to track who goes in or out. I just don't know that it's feasible for an operation like this where the funds are going to be limited.
And so one of the thoughts, I agree with Brad that the placard system works well, and I would just color them. So you'd have, so that you can keep the paperwork almost to a minimum. A person could go to the desk out there, pay their $50 fee and get their red placard. Next year it's green, the year after that it's purple, and that you rotate through or something. And again, it makes it really easy for Dave's staff to go through and say, hey, where's the purple placard? There's no purple placard. Give them a ticket for not, which is more than the $50, which Brad and I can work on. You make that fine hefty enough that they should have bought the placard, but.
Do you feel that an annual fee for a Carson City resident,
For
$50
Carson City
is-
residents.
I mean, I think that's pretty fair, because if you do the math, $5 per visit, you're definitely
So,
gonna get, the
What
public's
I'd
gonna get
like,
their money's
Mr.
worth.
Girolani, if at all possible, we could place, do you think you could be ready by the next meeting if we move this to an action item to make recommendations to the Park and Rec Commission on a fee basis? Because maybe that's something over this next 2 to 3 months we could actually be working on and implementing, because we're gonna need some cash flow to be able to implement some of these other,
We could
items.
incorporate the sponsorship policy as well and just have
Yes.
like a fee structure for the entire facility. I did want to point out, so Douglas County has a $50 annual pass that they provide, and then it's a $2 drop-in, but they make over $20,000 a year just from those two things. So it's pretty substantial.
Well, and I think that will meet some of the issues you discussed earlier. Then as the city, we can decide whether we want that revenue to just go in a fund back into the improvements to keep the range berms at the proper heights and things like that, because it's gonna be an ongoing issue, right? Erosion, things are gonna happen. So I think we're on the right. Do you think that'd be ready for the next meeting, as we could do that as an agenda item, or do you think you need more than one meeting? Anyway,
I can draft the staff report, but I'll need the backup from him
Okay.
to have that fee
we can work
schedule.
together. Okay.
And, we do have a key card system within the city at a lot of our buildings, but, it does require power. We do have issues with the solar power gate that we have now. If it opens and closes too many times, it runs the battery. It is difficult. So I think the simplicity of like what Douglas County has with the envelope and the state park kind of concept is very practical and could be a good, easy thing for us to implement and at pretty low cost.
Okay, great. We'll move that to a action item for further comment at a future meeting.
Madam Chair.
On the funding, we already discussed that earlier about the $250,000 for the CIP, and that the city's already invested $46,000 in Loomis and Associates, and then I'll work with staff and a couple of members to come up with some of our fundraiser ideas that we've already discussed. So that's where I am
Madam
on
Chair,
that.
are the receptacles, or can anyone answer, are those something that you purchase? Are those fabricated for an individual use?
We'll contact the state park systems, who has neat ones that they have all over the place.
There's all different
Yeah,
types, and we can
answers.
pick one that would work, for our facility.
So they're pre-made, you just order it and have it.
Yeah, you can provide them specifications just like a drinking fountain, and you provide the specifications that we need for wherever we decide that location is.
Maybe make it out of AR 500, which will be bulletproof, resistant.
But then that also drives the cost up then, just a little bit.
The,
No, not much.
You'll be putting your logo on a Iron Ranger. There you go.
I know that the fire pits, those big metal fire pits that have the open and closing grill, those are only $250 from state parks. And so, I mean, that's a lot of metal and a lot of welding for $250. So maybe they're a lot less than we'd imagine.
it's not tough to get a reader that would work at the range.
All right.
Because we take our credit card machine with us.
You just need Wi-Fi for the credit card, right? Okay, we're going to move on to item 5D, which is Mr. Blackwood's report on issues. I think he has some ideas for us today.
Jennifer, range, BLM discussion, 2 miles wide, 3 miles long. That's the hunk of land you need to be looking for based on a preliminary analysis of our new range. Now, that could be mitigated slightly depending on terrain, but we probably should at least pursue that amount of land so that we can have a range that won't be infringed upon in the future. Okay, I'm going to deviate from the long-range study today because I had an interesting discussion Monday evening with the fellows at the Carson Rifle and Pistol meeting. Two things came out of that meeting that sort of disturbed me. One of them was that the fellows who have volunteered to become RSOs are finding out that the only day the range is open is the day they're working, and therefore they never get to shoot. So they're out there putting in their time and effort and freezing themselves to death and never get to participate in the activity that they love so much, and they decided, I'll volunteer so that everybody else can shoot. And everybody else doesn't give a rat's rear end that those guys are out there so they can shoot and never thank them. And it turns out that most of the time the RSOs that are out there are not patrol officers or policemen, but they're mentors, they're teachers, they're educators. They're helping people out. They're saying, and if you walk up to somebody that put a little rubber ball on the ground and he's shooting at you, you say, hey, pal, if you do that, bullets are going to bounce out of the range and they'll shut this place down and we'll never be able to shoot out here again. Oh, gee, I never thought about that. That's a good idea. I think I'll stop doing that. The other thing, though, that bothered me even worse, and some of the comments today contributes to this, and that is that one of the fellows said to me, he said, look, why can't we shoot any day of the week at this range? We know where the targets should be placed to be safe. We know how to shoot our guns accurately at these locations. We understand the safety rules. We understand the implication that if a bullet bounces out of this range and smacks one of Rick's guys in the head over there in the dump, that it's going to be closed. We understand that. Why do you treat us like we're a bunch of idiots? Why don't you treat us with the respect that we deserve? That we ought to be able to walk out here any day on this range, set up our targets and shoot, and be able to look you straight in the eye and say, I know how to do this, I know I can manage this, and I'm not going to have to worry about bouncing around over the hill. The 5% of the average shooters are the ones we got to worry about. And those are the people that we let shoot out there on Sunday when there's nobody over on the range or over on the dump. So, based on this, I have a proposed plan. Because in addition to what we heard today, that we're probably months out, maybe years out from getting the range fully up and operational, and this is not going to sit well with the rest of the shooting community. We're borderlining on riot on some of the people within the shooting community. So here is my proposal. Number one, the range will be open Sundays, 7 to 6 p.m., with or without public ROs provided by the city. So anybody can go out there and shoot all they want to on Sunday. Number two, the range will be open Tuesday through Saturday by reservation only to the following. A, all clubs. So any club that has the proper insurance, any club who has RSOs can make a reservation any day of the week to go out and use the range. However, they must accept any walk-ins who come out on the range while they're there, but the walk-ins must participate in that club's activity under that club's rules and shoot with them. They just can't go wander around the range and do whatever they want to. They have to become an active participant in whatever that club's rules and activities are. B, commercial entities. For instance, CCW agencies, trainers, gunsmiths, whoever else will be able to use the range using the reservation system any day of the week, Tuesday through Saturday. They must have the approved insurance. They must have an RSO or equivalent accountability. They must have a business license. They must purchase a $100 annual use fee because this is a commercial activity. So, and now the reason for the $100 use permit is not to ding them another $100, but it is to confirm with them that they understand the rules and the responsibility that they are taking on by putting their business activity out on that range. In other words, do you understand where you put the targets? Do you understand all the other issues? And do you have proper insurance and those things? So that by getting an annual use permit, they would verify that. But they are not required to accept public walk-ins. So if they're out there having a CCW class and somebody walks in, they can say to them, I'm sorry, but you can't be on this range. You need a boogie. Law enforcement must also have RSOs, must follow the approved range rules, and are not required to accept public walk-ins. Now, further to that, all shooters must have a day use or an annual use permit. Now, I slightly disagree with my colleague over here. I don't think that this ought to be real complicated. There ought to be two fees. One, $10 a day if you want to go out and shoot on a day pass. Now, everybody says $10 is too much. Give me a break. You get a Big Mac, French fries, and a Coke, it costs you $10. And a box of 9mm ammunition costs you $10. So you're walking out there with $3,000 worth of guns, driving a $50,000 pickup. You can sure afford to spend $10 to go in and shoot on the range. The second thing that we ought to have is an annual permit. The annual permit ought to be $50. Okay, so if you look at this thing and say, hey, I'm going to use it more than 5 times a year, I'm going to use it 3 times a month, then the $50 permit for the whole year is good. Now, this permit ought to be based on a dedicated fix and end time. So in other words, you might say that the time when the permit is new is on July 1st, and it's that way for everybody all the time. You know, if you try to prorate it like you do your license plate, nobody could keep track of the paperwork. And we're trying to keep this simple, folks. You know, keep it simple, stupid idea. The second thing is that these permits could be sold or distributed by the shooting clubs, by the gun stores, from the Park and Rec Department, because if the Rifle and Pistol Club has got 50 members, probably those 50 members under this scenario are going to get to shoot 2 or 3 times a month, so they're going to want to buy an annual permit. So you Park and Rec provides these hang on the rear view mirror things and say, okay, you collect $50 from all these people and we're in. Now, one more caveat is that these fees that I am proposing in this memorandum are to be used exclusively and only for the operation and maintenance of this range. It's not to go into the general fund to fix a bicycle path. Also, the city will prepare a range reconstruction schedule, and all entities that would use the range Tuesday through Saturday would be subject to this reconstruction schedule, and be prepared to adjust their needs based on what we have for reconstruction. Now, I see some benefits at this proposal. One, the range will now be open 6 days a week to all shooters, with some restrictions, of course. But it will be open 6 days a week if the club entities and the commercial entities and others take advantage of the reservation system. The second thing is that with the range being open 6 days a week, it takes the pressure off of the city to get this reconstruction managed. So instead of us beating them up and saying, hey, you know, we want this done in 90 days, if it takes them a year, who cares? Because the range is open, people can use it, they can shoot on the range. Also, the clubs are going to benefit from this, because as the clubs are out there doing their shooting activity, and Joe Putz walks in off the street and says, hey, guys, what are you doing? I want to shoot. Fine. Let us tell you what we do. We'll show you how we do it. We'll even provide you the equipment. Come on over and join us. All of a sudden, the clubs have a new member. In addition to that, the clubs might be able to initiate some new programs like youth training. Maybe they want to have a rimfire shoot day. There's a bunch of other things that could be done, all under the auspices of the clubs out there in a sort of semi-private, but yet not private, complete private scenario. If we were to continue this, and originally I was a strong advocate of RSOs, but I believe that if the landfill is closed, that RSOs are not necessary. However, the one thing that I do think is beneficial is that the RSO program should continue for another month or two because of the educational aspect that it provides. Last Sunday, I was out at the range shooting IDPA. In the bay next to us was a young couple that came in and set up their targets and started shooting. And I looked over, and the target they set up was about 15 feet inbound from the Ballards. And so I walked over to them and I said, gee, folks, let me explain to you what happens to our range and ricochets and all that kind of stuff. And if you wouldn't mind moving your target down so that your shots impact the backstop, it would really be nice. And they said, oh gosh, we didn't know that was an issue. We never thought about it. And they immediately packed up their stuff, hauled it down to the end. So they were very, very cooperative. And I got the same feedback from a lot of the guys that are RSOs out there, the same sort of scenario. The last part is that, as I just discussed, I'm not sure that we need to have RSOs out there, because if we use this plan during the week, the entity that is made the reservation has the RSO. On Sunday, you don't need one because the landfill's closed. That's my thing.
Thank you.
I would love to. I absolutely love your plan, everything that's in it. I would be perfectly acceptable to everything you suggested. The one suggestion I would make is on the fee structure. I understand keeping it simple. However, we will have individuals, entities come and use our range where they are not residents of the city, and a lot of the tax revenue that was generated for the improvements was not paid by those individuals. I do believe there needs to be a delineation between Carson City residents, Nevada residents, and then non-Nevada residents. That would be the only recommendation I would make.
But I did forget one point. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot that one of my stipulations for a commercial entity is you must have a business license. Did I say that? Okay.
Well, and I agree with that. Thank you.
Customers that come in from California to shoot at our range. They come in from Sacramento. And I mean, these are guys almost weekly.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report. I'm gonna do something with it in a second on the right agenda item. We're gonna move on to item 6, which is future agenda items. And this is a discussion. So, I think from looking at what you did over there, you have this written.
I do.
Do we want to place that on a future agenda item for further discussion and action? Yes? Okay, so if we could have copies of Mr. Blackwood's recommendations, we can put that on as a future agenda item, because certainly we can't take action today, but we could put that on as a future agenda item. We already talked about working on the fee schedules, and then I'll work with a couple of us on the vendors or fundraising components. Do we have any other future agenda items that we would like Ms. Budge to put in? We're doing good there? That's enough work to scare her off anyway. Okay. Can we get a concession stand? A concession stand, now we're really gonna make some money with only chocolate candy bars. No. Okay. Snickers, there you go. All right, so no other items under 6? Okay, then we'll move on to any final public comments. You've been sitting there. The Wildlife Commission, how's it doing? No. Okay. Any general public comments? Come on up. All right, neighbor, be kind. It's my neighbor.
Members of the task force, Rob Beamer. I serve on the, I thought it was on, sorry.
You got new ones.
Yeah, my bad. Members of the committee, Rob Beamer, I serve on the, as a member of the advisory board to manage wildlife for the city, as well as I'm the president and chairman of the Nevada Operation Game Thief program. I have received, and I don't know about I can't speak for my other board members, but I have received multiple emails and some phone calls from members of the community. And I'll just say that, man, I think you guys are heading down the right direction. A little bit of points of clarification with regard to range safety officer certification. That's kind of, that program is the standard for range safety all across the nation, right? And so to become certified, does require that you take a course by somebody who is certified to teach that course. And I think that you guys have made reference to the kind of the range, I forget what the NRA calls it, but it's the kind of the range standards manual, if you will, that I know sounds like Parks and Recreation has been utilizing kind of as a reference, which is good, I think. I think that in there, it specifically talks about how RSOs can be advantageous to any shooting facility, right? I don't think anybody argues that, right? For commercial entities and for entities that, clubs and that sort of thing, they should want to have an RSO present, right? That should be something that's just kind of standard, at least in my arena, that's what we see typically. As far as the general public goes, there has been some disdain by the general public, especially members of this community, by some of the RSOs that have been serving as volunteers out at the range. There has been some concerns that maybe they take a little bit more authority than really what they should have, and maybe don't have that customer relations tact, if you will, right? Which you're not going to make everybody happy, and I understand that. But I think that going forward, though, that's kind of a standard is with any range. We saw this with the Capital City Gun Club, which is our shotgun shooting facility that many of you know about. They've kind of made it just a general rule of operation. When they're shooting out there, there's a range safety officer present at all times. And that's kind of what we see across the country with regard to managed range, period. It's just a safety thing, right? And getting people to volunteer to do that, that can be a challenge sometimes. Even at the Capital City Gun Club, they've had to make sure that their personnel that they have working out there is certified and they know what to look for and that sort of thing. Even then, there's still issues that happen. So I think it just lessens the chance of an incident happening. The one thing I hope that you will all consider is that range safety officers lessen the chance of liability on the city, right? They improve public safety. That's what they're meant to do, right? And so just some considerations there as you guys go forward. And then with regard to charging fees for use of the facility, one thing, I think Aaron Keller is on your guys' task force, right? So that might be something for this board or this committee to really look towards him for some guidance on that. When it comes to Pittman Robinson grant funds, the one thing we have to remember is that there has to be a level of the public being able to use the entity in order to qualify for the grant. So there is some qualification things there that we may want to, that the committee and the parks may want to consider. I know you probably are, but there's, when we get into making it a mandatory thing to charge for certain folks, I'm not saying I disagree with it, but there may be some conflicts there with being able to qualify for certain grants that you may want to consider. With that, I just say that my hat's off to you. This is a tough decision to make, and I think for the most part, the community sustains your guys' willingness to serve in this capacity. And so I personally thank you from as a member of this community for doing what you're doing and taking the time that you guys have to do that. So that's all. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Okay, is there any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 8. Is there any objection if we adjourn? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you. Good job, everyone.